afternoon. Welcome back to Harris Hall for the afternoon version of the Tuesday, August 8th version of the Board of County Commissioners regular meeting. We do have a couple of items of business to attend to this morning before we retire into executive session, Mr. Mokryski. A couple of items that are from this morning's agenda that were moved to this afternoon. And the first item is listed on our agenda as item 8A, which is, it's item 9A, which is Commissioner's Business Announcements. So at this time, I'll look around the board to see, are there any announcements from the Board of Commissioners? I'm seeing none. We'll move along to any future agenda item requests. Commissioner Lovall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Last meeting we had kind of I made a request that was kind of stumbling, so I've got it down to a little bit more of a science now, so I want to ask this of staff. I'd like to have staff investigate scheduling a work session at the earliest convenience for the board to hear what we've done related to the policies of the county regarding the unhoused. The purpose, in part, would be to look at decision points along the way where the board may have some discretion to reevaluate, adjust, or perhaps redirect our approaches going forward.
Okay, I'm trying to keep track of that.
So let me just repeat that, but it'd be a work session to where we can look at the policies of the county, of what we're doing as a policy board. That would include, all the broad ranges of policies of which we affect, about how we're making those policies, and if there's any readjustment, realigning, or some reattention that we could tweak some policies toward the unhoused to make better moves forward. That's kind of in a nutshell of what I'm asking.
Okay. I'll see if I have a couple of questions surrounding that, see if any other board members do. It looks like Commissioner Buck. Go ahead, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'm looking for clarification because if it sounds like you're requesting a review of our housing action plan, which is all of our policies pertaining to housing and housing production. But if I'm wrong, maybe you can clarify.
No, not specific housing plans. Thank you, Commissioner, but not specific housing plans per se, but just some of the things where there's policies in play that the county has that are daily living kinds of policies, like things happen at the curb and those kinds of things that we can look at from a different perspective to how we can hopefully help the housing unhoused situation better get into the programs that we as a county have at our disposal and have been run by really great people that we have here, so we can redirect those efforts more effectively.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Does that answer kind of get in your direction? I have Vice Chair Trieger with a question.
No, I'm still pretty confused about what that means specifically. We have had Kate Budd and our team in front of us many times. So if you're looking at a specific program or specific policy, perhaps that would enlighten me a bit.
Thank you, Commissioner. I may come back to you as, let's see what other questions bring forward, and then I'll come back to you, Commissioner Buck. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Just similarly, I was going to point out that we have, since 2021, have a standing quarterly presentation and update from our housing and homeless outreach services about what the services are that we are providing, and then the services that we contract. A lot of the direct work being done in community is done through our partners, and we see all those contracts come to us for approval, so it's not sort of a one-off policy decisions that we make, and that funding generally comes to us for the express purpose of delivering those services. So I also am a little confused as to what is missing for my colleague as far as information and what exactly the scope of this assignment would entail that we don't get on an iterative, ongoing basis and have opportunity to engage with our staff with our questions about. So I'm also having a hard time understanding this as a discrete request.
Let me add some clarification, if I may, Chair.
Please, go ahead.
This is not a program policy discussion. It's more of in line of how we enforce our streets and protect our citizens. It's not that I'm asking for us to review specific funding opportunities. I'm saying that there's certain things I'm hearing from constituents and business owners to where they feel powerless to some of the policies that they feel are or aren't in place that are available to law enforcement and public safety to help direct people in the right places rather than just leave them lingering in the streets like they tend to be sometimes. And so I'm just asking that some of the policies we have in place about safety and about public safety and about how we handle people in the right-of-ways in our streets and those kinds of things, of those kinds of policies, how we can look at those if we have any as a board, and if we can look at those differently, being maybe the Board of Public Health in that lens or in another lens to see if we're doing all we can to help either A, direct people to the right services from the street level, and also protect our citizens and business people from the infringements that I'm hearing that they're having on a day-to-day basis. So I'm just trying to get some sort of direction that we can take as a county to kind of shore up some of our policies in that direction without having to make other laws per se.
Commissioner Seneca, anything?
Yeah, so it sounds like you have a certain policy section you want looked at, not holistically all the policies on the homeless.
Right. Right.
Am I understanding that correct?
Well, I was trying to be, I guess maybe we should just be more specific. I mean, this was what my hope is in general, is we are the public health department. That's our role as public health board, right? So to me, my experience in dealing with my son in the homeless issue, that there's just a certain degree of disconnect that happens right at the street level to the next level. And it seems to me like many of the agencies that we dealt with had their hands tied. The sheriff's department, the local police had their hands tied for certain things because there were certain non-policies in place that didn't help them direct people in the most efficient way that they could. I'm also thinking of the Springfield ordinance that restricts the exchange of goods in public right-of-ways. And so my question in asking this is, why haven't we as a board ever asked to say, why isn't that a county-wide policy rather than just a Springfield city policy? If it keeps people out of the streets who are sometimes compromised mentally or in the drug condition, and makes the exchanges of things happen in non-right-of-way situations to where those exchanges are safer. So, my question is, why don't we have that policy as a county rather than just Springfield? So those kinds of issues, I think we could take some look at to see how better we could realign with what's working in our county and what's not working.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovall. I'm going to take a quick stab at this and see if we can narrow it down just a little bit. On our website, we have homelessness in Lane County, which covers a great deal of areas. We have homelessness as it pertains to the Health and Human Services departments, and then breaks down into Health and Human Services separately. Then we also have homelessness as it pertains to Public Works, for instance, and as it pertains to our public safety departments. So it crosses a lot of different areas. And I'm wondering, Commissioner Lovell, if we could take a little bit of time to think about this and see if we can narrow down to a very specific area. Because I'm looking at our tableau, for instance, which covers homeless housing and shelter policies, shelter utilization policies, and lots of different policies that affect very different departments in different ways. And if it is more toward the response to perhaps public notice of homelessness, somebody says I see a camp, or that I'm bothered by a camp that is on 12th and Main. I don't know if there is even a 12th and Main, but
Actually, there is.
in Springfield there is, of course there is. Right, sorry. Which many of those policies would be looking at city policies as opposed to county policies. Or if it's something to do with the sheriff's department, with the lack of resources where we can't even respond to crimes in progress in residences, So I wonder if we could kind of distill that a little bit and perhaps come back to it.
Well, I think that's the whole point of the work session, Chair, is to help distill that. I mean, some of the most of the complaints I've received in the last number of weeks have been in the Glenwood area, where there's this patchwork, like Santa Clara and North Eugene, where there's this patchwork of where city meets county, and yet how the policies are sometimes conflicting via property lines. And I'm trying to look for basically having the county maybe come up to the point of city policies to where there's not so much discrepancy on who calls what, and then I feel like the constituents are kind of left in a no man's land with not getting any help. That's the reason I brought it up.
Okay, very good. Let's sit on that for just a second. I think we have a timely issue that we need to deal with, and then we can come back to that in just a few moments, Commissioner Laval.
Okay.
Let's see. We need a 24-hour notice, evidently, on a potential executive session for tomorrow. Do we need to, because it's 1:45 right now, and if the session's at 2 o'clock tomorrow, which I would have difficulty attending, by the way, but can we have that come before us right now?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair, Commissioners. I do have additional information to share with the board in executive session regarding one of the subjects of this morning's discussion. Given the timeliness of that matter, I'd like to bring that before the board if possible in a special session tomorrow. Of course, given notice requirements, we need at least 24 hours notice in order to do that. I'm very flexible in terms of my time tomorrow. I want to find a time that works for the commissioners, knowing that this isn't a lot of time, lead time for you.
Very good. So in that we would need 24-hour notice, it would be 2 o'clock or later tomorrow. So would you like me to maybe poll the board to see what time tomorrow in the afternoon we could meet as an executive session, a special executive session?
I would be grateful for that. Thank
Let's
you.
take a look. So let's say 2 o'clock for an executive session at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Poll the board for that. Vice Chair?
Thank you. I have a question. I assume we could do this as a remote meeting,
Yes.
or at least as a hybrid. I have a site visit with a program, so that involves multiple people, that will take me up until probably 3 or a little after, and then would need to either get here, I'll be not far from here, or back home to remote in. So for me, 3:30 on works best. My morning's open, but I guess we're too short on that window, unfortunately.
So 3:30 is Vice Chair Trieger's only option. For me, 3:30 is difficult. I would only have about 25 minutes at 3:30 because I have a 4 o'clock that is absolutely firm tomorrow. So we could look at 3:30 if it's a 30-minute meeting. So let's change the polling to 3:30 tomorrow to meet Commissioner Trieger's schedule. Commissioner Senek?
And I have another question, too. Do we need potentially to come out into public session, and do we know if Metro's available for that? I guess that's a Diana question as
Yeah,
much
I'd
as...
have to coordinate with Diana.
I am on the line and I am working with Metro right now.
Had a hunch. So 3:30 tomorrow. Commissioner Buck, how does that look for you? Commissioner Laval?
Remote.
Remote, 3:30 tomorrow, 3:30 tomorrow?
Yep, I'm going to be with Public Works chip sealing, but I'll make sure we
Oh,
we get
wow, I
back.
wish I was. Okay. Then let us go for 3:30 tomorrow with a caveat that I do have a hard and fast at 4 o'clock that I simply cannot get out of. So.
Thank you for your flexibility. I appreciate it, all of you. Thank
So, Diana, we can cover that, Mr. Mokarajski, in assignments, I guess. But Diana, I think that gives us plenty of time with a 24-hour notice. Is that correct?
Just,
Yes, it does. And so we will meet in Harris Hall and you'll lead us into executive session. We'll have to discuss it off camera because I'm not sure how we'll probably be meeting remotely. So we'll discuss off camera
Yeah.
and we'll get it all set. So 3:30 tomorrow, we'll meet exec session and possibly come out.
And thank you, Ms. Jones. I'll work with you on the gaveling in for that, the logistics of it. Vice Chair Trieger?
thank you. And just thinking about your timing, Chair, to make sure, is 30 minutes, what's your best guess as to how much time we need for this, Council?
I think we won't need more than 15, to be honest, Vice Chair.
So it does meet your, but I was going to say, I could, 3:15 would be pushing it, but if we needed a little more time. But if you think it's only a few minutes of an item and we can do it all remotely and that fits for you, Chair, then
Then
3:30.
if 3:30 with the 30-minute caveat is adequate for you, Ms. Pettigrew?
Absolutely, yeah.
And Diana, we're looking at 3:30 then, if you can coordinate with me regarding gaveling in and making certain that that we have the right logistics in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I say with me, I'm just the, all I have is this. But, and of course, with Council Pettigrew to make certain that it meets all the requirements you need, not everything that you have in place can be in place for that time. Great. Very good. Then we're back on future board assignment requests and back to Commissioner Lovells. And I was kind of drilling down a little bit on the, I've been working on homelessness with the county for 11 years, with the city for 10 years. And there are a lot of policies. I mean, it really does cover a lot of broad areas. Is there a particular field of policies you're suggesting? How do we respond?
Yeah, I would say that if you were to narrow the field down, it'd be more on street enforcement policies.
So that would be to public safety then, because anything
Correct.
outside of the city limits that involves enforcement typically is either, it might be our FIT team, our forensic intensive treatment team, or it might be the sheriff's team. So it would be responding to, for instance, in Glenwood or other urbanized areas that are outside of city limits. Does that narrow that down a little bit?
Yeah. That helps.
So public safety response in urbanized areas outside of city limits. And Commissioner Buck, your hand is back up, so please go ahead.
Thank you. So if I understand this right, you want to specifically have a work session about a policy regarding, that's very specific, like that Springfield has right now regarding having folks on street corners maybe asking for money, and expanding that to the entire county through the Board of Public Health. Is that clear? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, if that's possible. I mean, the conversation of us being in the Board of Public Health opens up, I think, an enormous possibility to do things that are really going on in the county that are inhumane, in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of other people share that same opinion, but it just seems like the public safety arm of our county has become more and more hamstrung, and I think that if we had some other policies in place from the position of the Board of Health or the Board of County Commissioners, that we could allow our public safety team a few extra tools in the toolbox to help bring our folks that are having issues in the street to the place where they can get help.
Okay, then Commissioner Buck, go ahead.
I have, in all my years being commissioner, I've never had anybody request, any resident or any worker or staff member ever requesting this. Until I see or hear something from the public that this is a particular issue in the county, I don't think I'll head nod to this, and I'm not interested in imposing this on other cities within the county, and I want them to have the authority to do that for themselves if they so choose. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm not certain that it was specifically for that particular issue. I think if I'm reading this right, Commissioner Lovell, you're concerned about the homeless people, the people who are unhoused or in unhoused situations need a response that is going to satisfy their needs, or is it more toward the people who are observing the?
Well, I think it's both, Chair. I mean, I think the people, at least at the calls that I've been fielding, they feel powerless to do anything, and when they try to initiate some sort of help from the county, there's an endless phone chain that really results in no result at all. So I'm wondering if there's some ways that we can at least give, like I said, our public safety department at least some other tools of which they can help both sides of the coin here, both the unhoused and the people who are experiencing things in their neighborhood like excess trash and windows being broke out and people homesteading and camping in abandoned houses and that sort of thing. That's really where I think we need some help on, because I think people in the neighborhoods feel very powerless at stuff like that.
Well, my trepidation with this is that we know that the Sheriff's Department has an issue with resources, and if the Sheriff's Department was asked to respond in Glenwood to this sort of a call it complaint or a report, they would be diverting efforts from elsewhere to do so unless we find some revenue stream for them to do it. Additionally, once they do respond, in that we all know the lack of facilities in Lane County for taking people who are suffering from behavioral health issues, et cetera, on the street, that I don't know, the issue would be, it seems like kind of a chasing the tail sort of thing, that we want the public safety system to respond, and we want them to take them someplace, but we don't have the resources to respond, and we don't have any place to take them. And unless there's some other tool, as you put it, Commissioner.
Well, I've had some requests from people that in the private sector that have offered a great deal of help in this regard, community help, offering to do community engagement, involvement, team building, that sort of thing. So I think I hear what you're saying exactly, Chair, but we do have obviously a lack of sheriffs and deputy patrols in the area, and to burden public safety system with even more policies would be, I think, not the right approach. But to engage concerned citizens that want to help with that kind of aid, I think is where I'm heading with this, based on their request to me to do so.
Okay, all right. I have a great deal of trepidation about this until it were narrowed down very specifically to what particular policy in particular are we looking at, and what are the potential avenues of discussion. I don't know at this point how we form a discussion around that. Still working on that. Ms. Mokrajewski, do you have any suggestions on that? Is there anything that I may be missing? Because I'm inclined, I will say, to not support this request at this point in time until it's narrowed down a little bit further.
I think it's the board's call. I understand what Commissioner Lovell is requesting, so that was the thing that I'm always listening for, is who are we going to ask to to gather information and present. I think based on this request, if the board gave head nods, we'd probably have our sheriff's office, our human services team, and probably county council, because it's related to the board's role as the public health authority. And it is, as you said, it sounds like around establishing laws, enforcing laws, and then dealing with sort of the, the response elements and service connection afterwards. So I'm clear, I think, on who we would have present to the board for a discussion. It's really up to the board as to whether or not you want to have that discussion.
Then is Commissioner Lovell, is that the full extent?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Mr. Mokrajewski and I and Council Pettigrew and I have talked about this, and we're trying to figure out a way to word it to where it gets us all to the table, so we can roundtable some ideas of how our citizens can be protected, how our homeless and unhoused can be serviced and protected in the way that my son was not. And there's got to be some policies and some agreement that we could make as the Board of Health, or whatever role we play with our city partners, that we all can be on the same page. So that's really the ultimate goal, is that we need to move the needle here a little bit, rather than just continuing to do what we're doing, because in Springfield in particular, we're seeing a major uptick in disturbances downtown, and unhoused situations, and mental health and drug stuff, and there needs to be, I think, a team effort here. That's really what I'm trying to gather.
Okay. And once again, my trepidation is that we do have a great deal of effort that's been put forward already, a great deal of resources that are put into housing, homelessness, behavioral health, and public safety, and other issues surrounding homelessness. We are attempting it in every venue to coordinate with both of the large cities and with the smaller cities and rural communities. So I think until I hear something a little bit more concrete as far as a request, I think I don't believe I'm going anyplace with this, personally. So, to the board.
Back at another time.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Further assignment requests? I'm seeing none. Mr. Mokrajewski, do you have a review of assignments?
So I have the request to schedule an exec session for 3:30 p.m. tomorrow afternoon.
Any corrections, additions? Okay, it sounds as though that is exactly what we have then, Mr. Mokrajewski. Then that concludes the regular business of today, and we do have a need for an executive session this afternoon At the sound of my gavel, we will be moving into executive session, and I will be momentarily reading into executive session. Commissioner Lovall?
Yes, Chair. I have a possible conflict here. I'd like to announce my legal counsel understands that there may or has been some type of concern or concerns raised by Ms. Pettigrew involving me, that some type of mediation is or may have been suggested. So my attorney has requested the specifics of the concerns from the county, but to date has received no details from the county's representative on the matter. Since my attorney has not received a response to his request, and what a response may require me to do under ORS Chapter 244, and in an abundance of caution, based on the advice of my legal counsel, I'm declaring a potential conflict of interest in relation to this executive session item. In addition, if any information is developed during the executive session or elsewhere, I may have an actual conflict of interest, then I will make that declaration at the appropriate time and proceed according to the requirements of a public official who has an actual conflict of interest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Commissioner Lovall has declared a potential conflict of interest. Anything else before I read us into executive session? Very well. Then I will note that once we get into executive session, I will some of the items that I read in this in the preamble down here, I'll read in the executive session also. At the sound of my gavel, we will adjourn the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Excuse me. We'll recess the regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, and we'll meet in executive session at 10 minutes past 2. Does that work for everybody? 10 minutes past 2 in the BCC conference room. The Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602A, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. The news media are not allowed to tape, video record, or take notes beyond the general subject of the session. Verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise.